Okay, hi guys! Another week, another video, another great setup. I am so thrilled to be discussing this topic today. I suppose the title is a dead giveaway now, isn't it? But it doesn't matter. I'm going to say it with all the enthusiasm that it's deserving of. We are talking about artificial intelligence. Yes, and the book that I have for you is Janelle Shane's You Look Like a Thing and I Love You. And it is all about AI, all the goodness of AI and a lot of bad things as well. The fantastic thing about this book is no matter what level of proficiency you're at, you can immediately pick this up, and this is just so comfortable, it's so easy to get in, it's simply written, it's very smooth and free-flowing. She also has a tendency to repeat like a lot of technical terms that she mentions in the beginning, just so that everybody can stay in touch with all of that. Before I continue, I have to say that this video is not sponsored in any way, or the author doesn't know that I exist. I am just doing this of my own accord because I thought it was a fantastic book. It made me laugh a lot, it made me think a lot, and yeah, now it's time to tell you what I learned from the book. Bits and pieces, by the way, because I don't want this to be a spoiler video. If you're looking to pick up the book, there is a ton of content that it is still extremely rich with. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'm just going to give you like sort of my 2 cents on what I made of the book, and there were particular points in the book that really caused my eyes to light up, and I was like, oh whoa, I did not know this before. So AI is basically a simulation of human intelligence to a machine. So we're trying to enable a machine to think, to perform complicated actions like sifting through wide variety of data and coming up with patterns. So pattern recognition essentially, and most importantly also optimization, right? Can it maximize or minimize certain parameters that you ask it to? AI is used in, let's say, driverless vehicles, right? It's used for image recognition for when a car is out there without human intervention, can it navigate, can it identify sort of the nooks and crannies, and how good is it at it? And this is such an intricate task if you think about it. I remember one of our professors was teaching us in a class, and he mentioned how they were developing these driverless vehicles or autonomous vehicles, and there was a slight change in the weather conditions, for instance, and the AI simply freaked out. It didn't know how to go about that because this is what happens, right? If there's a slightest of change, because the training data of the AI is so limited, and that's exactly the range of operations that it works on or it's familiar with, anything beyond that causes it to break apart. So that happens, and then they have to basically, for that particular project, go back, give it new training data, and then reconfigure the whole thing. So anyway, I digress. So that's one of the biggest advantages of AI. It's used in language translation, Google AI, right? We're all aware of that. So these are some of the things that are going on with regards to AI, but its applications, if you think about it, are so wide-ranging and so diverse. Like for the past 6 months, I was working on a seminar at my university, and the course that I was working on, it's called Machine Learning and On-Chip Systems, and it's about how you can optimize the performance of your PCBs, or printed circuit boards, that we electrical engineers use. So you assemble all of your electrical components on a PCB. These are the green-colored, default green-colored boards, if you've seen them. And the idea was, how can you detect defects in these PCBs using the tools of AI, right? So that's another area or sector of application, and there are many like that. And currently we live in a time where AI is increasing all around us by leaps and bounds. It is everywhere, it is inescapable, and so it's good to know what this technology has to offer and where it is headed, more so because we live in a time where views on AI are so polarized. There are people who say, oh my god, AI is going to take over the world and humans will become obsolete in no time, and then there are people that say, oh, we have nothing to worry about, AI is just, you know, it's whatever, right? So the whole, I guess, the overarching theme of this book was, it tells you the reality or the actuality of the situation based on extensive research and based on expert perspective. So this is what we're here to talk about. AIs tend to be kind of lazy. You know, given the opportunity, they will always take the path of least resistance. So for instance, the book mentions this one AI that was trained to bet on racing horses, so clearly it had to come up with a winning strategy. And what the strategy it eventually came up with is, well, how about nobody places a bet, right? And that does make sense, because if nobody places a bet, technically your chances of losing are going to be 0. But then again, that's not the right approach. So, but you get the idea, right? Given the chance, there are sophisticated ML algorithms that will do nothing. And by ML, I mean machine learning. This is an abbreviation I'm going to be using throughout the course of this video. There are links in the description below, by the way. Feel free to navigate around the video. Feel free to, move around. It's a free world. Free world we live in. Alright, I digress. So, that was the first trait of AI, and then there was another very cool experiment in which an AI was kind of positioned in a simulated hallway, and it had to decide what people could go right or left, and basically it had to minimize the number of people who could go left, for instance. And what it ended up doing is, it decided to come up with a strategy of killing all human beings. Because it figured out if it killed everybody, then the number of people going towards the left would be minimal. So, you know what I mean? Now, this is not to say that an AI would do this in the real world. AIs are not smart or intelligent enough, and that is the whole point. They do not have the capability to make these decisions on their own. They're merely influenced by the training data that they're supplied with, and they just want to come up with a best case scenario. But the way they do that, like I said, is path of least resistance. But then that takes me to point number 2, is that the AI, it has a very primitive brain, equivalent to that of a worm. Now, this is not me just picking up a random animal and comparing an AI's intelligence capabilities to that. This is the view of experts out there who say that that's kind of the level of intelligence of AIs that we currently have. The book talks about a very interesting word. It's called cyberpunk. I like it. I didn't know that before. Apparently, cyberpunk is a genre of science fiction which is a very dystopian one, i.e. you have machines and you have AI kind of taking over civilization and rendering all human beings obsolete, or you have society being policed by AI robots and stuff like that, right? So that is, at best, science fiction. And turns out it is going to be this way for the span of our lifetime at least, because AIs currently, their ability is very, very limited in terms of how well they can actually think for themselves, which they can't. They really can't. Alright. So then that takes me to point number 3. AIs, basically, they work in a very narrow and limited fashion. They can only accomplish one particular task at a time. So you tell them, okay, come up with names for, I don't know, a cake recipe or some such thing. They're going to come up with names for that. But then if you train the same AI on, say, come up with names for a rock band or something, right? These are, again, examples derived from the book. They're going to struggle with that, and they're going to mess up absurdly because it's just something that an AI is not capable of, right? And this is also sort of a counter answer to people who say, well, what about AIs that can perform complicated calculations, or that can win at games of chess or Go and just beat their human counterparts, and not just beat them, but really brutally so. The answer to that question is very simple. It's like at any point in time, there's always going to be a machine that is better than humans. Think of our computers. Our computers process much faster, they can deal with a lot more, they can handle a lot more, they have greater computational power. But that doesn't mean that a computer can walk, right? That doesn't mean that it can perform high-level dynamic thinking functions. So this is, again, the same concept, the same logic applies to AI as well. AIs are extremely limited, and they're confined in terms of their functionality depending on the training data that they receive. And this is very important, because if the training data that an AI is given is subject to biases, is influenced by human prejudices, then that will be reflected in the results. So for instance, I know this might be hard, so let's really drag the concept home with an example. If an AI was asked to recommend what kind of prisoners are eligible for parole, right? This actually happened in the United States. The AI overwhelmingly recommended people of a certain skin color. So there was that sort of a racist element to it, and that was simply because the training data that it was fed with from the past tens of years was biased, right? Was distorted by our own human distortions. And so the point is, this also eventually plays into the AI, and then it tampers with the result, because that's not what we want, right? And so that brings me to this other point, is that AI is basically free of all the laws of physics, the laws of ethics, the laws of morality. They don't apply to it because it doesn't understand. It simply doesn't have that power of conception and comprehension. So if an AI is simulated in a particular environment, like I said, it always tries to take the path of least resistance, or the easiest way out. So what it would do then is it would try to, let's say an AI that is asked to walk would try to burrow through a wall, or it would find glitches in the system, and then it would exploit those glitches to get to the result. Now that is problematic because these glitches exist in a simulation, but not in the real world. In the real world, we are bound and confined by the laws of physics. But clearly, an AI would not understand that. So if you have an AI that is confined to a simulated environment and then you bring it out in the real world, it might sometimes freak out. And that is known as the problem of overfitting. Because the AI doesn't know what to do anymore, because the real world is the real world where it cannot take any shortcuts, right? And also when it comes to the idea of ethics and morality, like I told you, it came up with the strategy of wanting to kill human beings. Clearly that is not okay. Clearly that would never be acceptable. It would never work out in the real world, okay? I must emphasize that that strategy that it came up with of killing people was entirely a simulated strategy. It was not something they would ever do in the real world. I'm not talking about malicious AI that are out to psychopathically get people. But anyway, there you have it. These are some of the most important, most pressing characteristics of AI. And now we're going to talk about a couple of things that I found particularly fascinating from reading this book, and that made me go, whoa, I did not know this before, I cannot believe this. There were points also, by the way, I have to say this, this book is hilarious. It is, and that's an understatement. It's going to make you laugh a lot. So, by the way, I live in a dormitory, and it is very acoustically, let's just say, loud. So, I'm pretty sure that I can be heard by my neighbor, and there were points in time when I was just reading, "You look like a thing and I love you," and I would just burst out laughing at random points. And I think my neighbor probably thinks that I have lost it in social isolation, because I would just burst out laughing randomly. But, oh well, I don't mean to scare my neighbors, but the point is it's a funny book, alright? You will laugh at it. It's just AI comes up with the most ridiculous things. So one of the foremost things that I found fascinating was the earliest neural networks, the earliest artificial neural network was obtained from Hebb. His name is Jacob Hebb, he's a Canadian psychologist, and it was from his model of the brain, because Hebb came up with a theory of neurons that fire together, wire together. And this is a very poignant and very powerful theory that is widely accepted in the field of psychology. The idea is, if you have a neuron A and that fires and sets off a neuron B, these neurons are closely clustered and they're also going to wire together, i.e. they will end up performing the same sort of functions, controlling the same parts of the human body or what have you, right? So that was the idea from a psychological perspective, and then computer scientists came along and they were like, well, let's borrow this and let's see if this framework of having neural connections can then be extended to a machine. And I think that is absolutely mind-blowing. We're trying to copy from biological life forms, and this is not the first time we've done this, but to me, what's absolutely gorgeous, I would say, is this interplay of seemingly unconnected fields. You have psychology on one side, and then you have mathematics, you have cryptography, you have algorithms, you have computer science, you have data science on the other side, right? So it's this beautiful underplay of things, because you never know, when you're learning something, you never know what clicks and what you get inspired by, right? And I love that. I absolutely love that. So that's the first thing that I really liked. Also, the other idea, wow, when I first read this sentence in the book, I read this over, I think, at least 3 times, and I was so overwhelmed by this one sentence. And that basically says that the neurons in the human mind, there are 86 billion neurons. They're not just 86 billion neurons. In our brain, it's 86 billion neural networks. And just think about the depth of that sentence for a while. Because in an AI, you will have one neural network made with a cluster of neurons, like there are a cluster of neurons in our brain. But every single neuron in our brain is equivalent to its own entire neural network. I would like to give it 8.5 convoluted pickup lines out of 10. By the way, the title of the book, You Look Like a Thing and I Love You, is a pickup line that was generated by an AI. So again, if you need examples of that and more, because the book is brimming with all of that sort of goodness, right? Pick it up if you like, and it will not disappoint. That is all I can say. Alright, it is going to come up to your expectations, regardless, again, of whether you're a beginner or whether you're an expert. It's sort of like a combination because it's so incredibly well researched. I just feel like any and every kind of research that happened in the domain of AI from the beginning, from its very inception. Okay guys, sorry for interrupting, but I'm going to pause the video for one quick second to address an observation somebody made about me. They said that I tend to look at the right while thinking. That's accurate. But I was curious as to why that happens and what it indicates. According to research done in the 1970s in the field of neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, if people look to the right while thinking, that means they are being visual, i.e. they're actively conjuring images from memory. There is no conclusive proof of this as yet, but there's definitely something called lateral eye movement, or LEM, and people engage in LEM when thinking, to the point that when researchers asked people to curb the tendency to look sideways, it actually impacted their ability to respond to difficult questions. So in short, LEMs help us think. Alright, back to video. I just feel like any and every kind of research that happened in the domain of AI from the beginning, from its very inception, feels like it's somehow made its way in that book. Alright, that's how thoroughly researched it is. So yeah, that's my recommendation for the week. My light is flickering and it's distracting me. Don't flicker. Thank you. I appreciate your cooperation. Okay, great. Hey guys! Here we are again. Another week, another video, another day of learning, equipping ourselves with knowledge and just becoming better than we were yesterday together. That sounds condescending. I cannot say that. I'm sure you're better. I'm sure you're good in every which way. Regardless of whether or not you have seen this video all the way through. Oh shit, I forgot to focus. Ah, there, it's flickering again. It's flickering again. Why would it flicker? What have I done to you? Oh dude.